5 o'clock.
5? I said I believe.
Sorry.
So, Dan, do you expect to bowl on the power play tomorrow? For my next question, how is Glenn Maxwell? He's obviously was feeling it from what I understand. Do you expect him to play? Where is he at?
He's definitely been in full recovery mode the last few days. I think we all saw the effects of the innings and in particular the heat. So I think today's a big day, see how he pulls up. But obviously we've had a couple of days off, so there's been no training. He's not here today, but we'll just see how he sort of feels as the day continues on. But it's obviously been pretty hectic for him the last few days.
So will he have to do any sort of fitness tests or anything, or is it just a matter of how he feels on Saturday tomorrow?
I think it'll be how it feels. I don't think it'll be a fitness test scenario. We understand that obviously now that the semi-final is pretty definitive in Kolkata on the 16th, that it will be a build towards that. And I think he does have a track record of being able to bounce back pretty quickly, even with some time away from the game. So I think, like I said, it will depend on how today goes and then make a decision. Being a day game as well, will probably be tonight they'll make the call.
Coach, everyone's rightfully raving about Maxwell the batter, but can you just give an insight about Maxwell the spinner? How the work that has been put in by all of you to ensure that he has emerged as one of the most effective yet economical spinners in the tournament?
I think you have to give Glenn most of that credit. I think he's a very willing bowler, and I think sometimes that can be the hardest part of being an all-rounder, that even though you do have the skills, the desire's not always there, and Maxie loves bowling, and he loves the strategy that goes into it, probably like with his batting. So I think you see a bowler that's evolved over the last few years, and I think he's been able to, in particular, start to bowl over the wicket to right-handers, which sort of went out of fashion for a period of time, and I think it's his ability to almost get near topspin, challenge the stumps the whole time from round and over the wicket, and I think particularly in the power play, going over the wicket and being able to either skid it on or spin it back into the right-handed batsman has been his biggest improvement, and meant that he can bowl at any stage of the innings. And even Paddy has the confidence to turn to him in the 46th or 47th over the other day to two right-handers. So I think he's a extremely confident bowler because of all the work he puts in and how skillful and intelligent he is around his bowling.
Okay, Dan. Steve Smith, how's he going? And do you expect him to play? And also, do you think Sean Abbott is a chance to play? Is there a temptation to give him a go just in case he is needed in the finals?
I think if you take it all the way back to the start, to try and get those three fast bowlers through 9 games in a short period of time, we always probably presumed that would be a tough challenge. So Sean was always in the picture as a potential replacement for one of them. So I think that'll come into the equation once again. I think just weighing up how everyone comes through these last few days. But I don't think it'll be a case of trying to play a game just for the sake of it. It'll be a case of if one of those 3 fast bowlers needs a bit of a break. Steve Smith, I'm probably Cole, you're better to answer that than me. I'm not really up to speed with smudges. I don't talk to the batters.
Well, just on the bowling then, Mitchell Starc hasn't had the impact that he sets a very high standard from a World Cup perspective, but hasn't had the impact that he did in 15 and 19. What are the things you're sort of working on, and what do you put that down to, and how can he sort of take that next step to sort of have more of an impact over the last few games?
I think you still see the threat every game, the ability to swing the ball in that first 2 to 3 overs, and particularly at night time. I think we've seen the difference between bowling in the afternoon as opposed to night. So I think whenever a team wins that toss and has that opportunity, particularly someone like Starc, I think back to the Netherlands game in Delhi, how destructive and ineffective he can be. So I think if we can have the ability to set that up, makes a big difference. Obviously tomorrow's different in a day game, so that variance won't be there. But I think we, like coaching staff, just see that threat the whole time in those first few overs. And even if it hasn't gone exactly how it's wanted to, we have no doubt that he can be destructive on his day. And I know Mitch is working hard towards that.
this being an inconsequential game as such, because you're already in the semi-finals, what are the steps you are taking to make sure that you don't lose out anything, you don't miss?
I think the home dressing room at Eden Gardens is better than the away one, so we want second place so we can get in that dressing room. I think you have to take every factor into it. Whether rain plays a part, I don't know, but to finish second is still important because it has some very minimal benefits, but it will be a focus for the group to say that we can have an opportunity to finish second if we can win this game well. So I think that's the starting point. I think standards been set. In fact, we've won 6 games in a row after a tough start. The fact that you want momentum going into a semi-final, all those little things, and there's personal performances. I think that's the main thing. We've had some guys who've had amazing tournaments, and then some guys who probably have lacked opportunities to impact games, and those are the guys that will be wanting to step up in this situation.
Can you pass that microphone forward, please?
Dan, just on Adam Zampa, he obviously had a slow start to the tournament, and then and has faced a lot of physical issues, and obviously bowled extremely well through the middle part. Just your view of him through the tournament, what you've liked about his World Cup.
It was obviously a very difficult start through injuries and illness. To be actually able to play, I think probably the first 3 games was a bit of was an amazing effort because I think was pretty close to pulling out against Pakistan, fitness test right up to just before the toss. So to see him get through that, I think, has been the starting point. But I think his control of his length has been the best that I've seen in this period of time, particularly through those 3 games where he took 3 games of 4 wickets in a row, and then against England. I think his length control, I think we all know the skills and the variations, but his ability to actually just land the ball in that spot time and time again gave most teams limited opportunities to attack him. I think England game, he didn't go for a boundary, might not have gone for anything more than a single against 2 left-handers, against Stokes and Mohan, who are very good players of spin. I think that's been the testament in that. And I think it is all about the length control for him because all the other skills are there, but when you combine that with that aspect of the game as well, he's almost unplayable.
And you mentioned before about Sean Abbott and potentially having the chance tomorrow. Andrew McDonald talks a lot about balancing attack and not straight swaps, but where does Sean fit into that? What's his kind of strength if he were to play?
Well, I think he's covered all bases for Australia in the past. I think back to the top end series a little while ago. I think he opened the bowling, did exceptionally well. We know his strengths from Big Bash, being able to bookend an innings, back-end innings, and I think the role that we've most liked for our fast bowlers is that ability to come back through the middle stages and be an attacking option. And I think if he gets the opportunity, he'll definitely jump into that role. So probably outside of the power play and looking to be a wicket-taking option for us, because I think we've seen throughout the tournament it's very difficult to stop batsmen scoring apart from taking wickets, and that's been a real focus for us as a bowling group.
Hi, Coach. Bangladesh and Australia played a bilateral one-day series back in 2011. After that, they played a World Cup match that got washed away in rain. Again, a Champions Trophy 2 years later, also that got washed out in rain. The only match got result in last World Cup. Do you think these 2 sides should play more often? Because Australia are a very 5-time world champions, but Bangladesh are developing side. So what's your thought on that?
I think most teams are grappling with the schedule and then how busy it is. You think of the Australian team straight off this World Cup, they're going to play 5 T20s against India and then straight into a home test summer. So I think there's a desire for all teams to have an equal amount of games against each other, but the scheduling is so tight that it is hard to factor in. So I think there's like I said, there is desire for those games to happen, but finding time is the most difficult bit.
Time for a few more. Brad.
Dan, you played against Australian teams in knockouts before, and now obviously you're in the Australian camp. You've been there for a while, but there's always this talk of once Australia get into the semi-finals, beware, they have this aura. Obviously, you can't quantify aura, but do you read much into it at all, from your experience of playing against them and now being with them?
Well, I think experience against them, you're always coming up against quality players. So the fact that you saw those players in front of you there was some trepidation around that, and you knew that they had that group of match winners that could win the game. And I think that's the same here. When you look through the team list, you see obviously Maxwell from the last innings, but everyone of that batting group can step up and take a game away, and the bowling group is so experienced and so skillful. But I think the main factor is just probably the confidence coming in from winning 6 games in a row, and hopefully it's 7 games in a row leading into a semi-final. I think that's the thing that'll give the team the most, I suppose, comfort around heading into that, particularly against South Africa, who outplayed us in the second game of the tournament. I think the fact that if we're coming off these 7 wins, hopefully, that'll mitigate that performance in that second game.
And you just said earlier that you don't speak much to the batters, but Manas definitely speaks a lot to you.
Yeah, I still don't speak much to him.
I know, that's fine. With Manas, you can't. Just his role, Dan, before the World Cup began, there was a lot of talk of him and Steve Smith potentially not playing together for the makeup of the side. But based on how he's gone, do you think he still has a role in there, or will it come down to him or Marcus Stoinis or any of those combinations?
I think because the tournament, whether it's been injuries or illness, that we've had to sort of be makeshift the whole way through. So the way that Mahan's played, and certainly you think of the Sri Lankan innings where he was able to get us through, I think his style of play, and he was coming off the back end of the South African series where he was pretty dominant through that. So I think we've seen Manas at his best, how good he can be at one-day cricket, but I think that probably applies for all of the 8 batters, if you look at it like that, including the all-rounders. So I think it is going to be a balancing act with the bowling group, who's available, and then the type of wicket as well. I think all those things come into play. But stylistically, I think there's no reason why the 2 of them can't play together. I don't think there's anything inhibiting that at all.
So Australia have now played at multiple venues. So do you think at any point spinners have been impacted by dew to the same extent as they sometimes do during the IPL months?
We're definitely concerned about it in Ahmedabad. I think there was that affected our conversations around the toss, because I think 2 days before at training was some of the dampest I've seen. So we were concerned, and I think that was part of the reason that England bowled first. But I think the thing that overrides all that is that first 10 to 15 overs with swing bowling and seam bowling has been a huge part of the tournament. And so teams are geared up towards batting first to try and utilise that period. And it may be sometimes affecting the spin bowler, but I think if you think back to that game, Zampa 3 for 21, didn't affect him. Umpires are allowing the change of balls. So I think there's a lot of things in favour to make you think you can work through that due aspect, but it's not ideal. But I think there's enough there in the first 15 overs for the fast bowlers to work through it.
Then you have played against Bangladesh a lot, and you work with them as a coach. You work closely with the spinners, so obviously you have a very good idea about Bangladesh. So how much input you are giving, and Bangladesh didn't have a particularly good World Cup. So how do you see them as an opponent in general?
I think like most teams, you go through the individuals and you start realising how good they are. And so when they turn up as a team and you've done your scouting and planning, you see them at their absolute best. And not having Shakib here is obviously a big factor, but Mushfiqur, Mahmudullah, they're experienced players, have scored a lot of World Cup runs. And we're expecting both Mahidis to play in this game. So Mahidi Hussain's one of my favourite cricketers. That's little Mahidi, not big Mahidi. And I think he's a fantastic bowler. And both of them are fantastic bowlers. So if they get their opportunity, we understand how good they are and how effective they can be. And particularly in a day game where I think obviously the toss is not going to be such a big deal. The wicket could slow up and we could actually see spin playing more of a part in the back end.
Yeah, long tournament, how the batting has come up, and because of IPL-like conditions, what has been the challenge for the batters? And max innings, has it papered over any concerns?
I think, like I've suggested, that period, 10 to 15 overs, I mean, Naveen was exceptional in the last game for Afghanistan. Some swing bowling there that was so impressive. And so I think as a batting group, you have to be aware of that, and it's almost fighting through that first 10 overs, because as we saw from Maxwell, albeit one of the best innings you've seen, you can score at the back end of the innings, but that first 10 overs can really put a hole in it, and we've seen that as a bowling group, and we've been able to get teams in that position. I think back to the first game against India when they were 3 down very early on, could have got Kohli out, but if you get through that period, you can bat and bat for long periods of time. So I think that's the messaging to the batting group, that it's going to be tough at the start, but if you can get through that period, there are runs available.
Thanks, everyone. Apologies, we couldn't get there.
Thanks, guys.